Welcome back. All right, 32 team video today. 32 players, and I've got them in randomized order yet again. So from Vegas through to Vancouver, we're going to take a look at 32 young players. I want to talk about young players who I feel like could have really strong second halves of the season. In some cases, they're going to need to bounce back. In some cases, they haven't played a lot. Sometimes it's through injury. Sometimes they're just, in the minors, waiting for their chance, this kind of thing. So kind of a little bit all over. And there's one team I couldn't find anybody who qualified to me as a young player. And in a few of these, I've kind of stretched the idea of young player. There's a couple that are in their actually their mid 20s. So to me, a young player is 20, 21, 22. Once you get into 24, 25. But anyways, I had to allow for that. And then there was one team I just couldn't find anybody. All right, that being said, you guys can let me know in the comment section below which young players you're looking forward to seeing what they can do in the second half of the season. They might be with the team now. Maybe they'll come up and play for the team after the World Juniors. Maybe they'll be called up towards the end of the season, right? So, anyways, we're going to start things off with the Vegas Golden Knights. A player that hasn't been in their lineup a ton, but I still think has a lot of talent. They're bringing him along slowly, and I had him as a player to watch coming into this season, and so I'll double down on that now. Dorofeev has played 18 games. He has 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. I know he's capable of more. It's really a matter of Vegas having a really deep lineup, and so it's trying to find a spot for him. But when he gets in there, I think he's good. And so again, if Vegas runs into any kind of injury problems in their top 6, Dorofeev may very well be a good option for them there. For Colorado, going with Bowen Byram. Byram's had a bit of a rough first half of the season, although he has played 37 games. So the good news, if you're an Abs fan, is Byram's playing. The 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points, and some spotty defensive play here and there. Byram isn't setting the world on fire as expected. I remember when Colorado got Byram that there were scouts that said they're going to be able to have Byram and Makar on their blue line. That's not fair. Basically, the idea of you can play one of them one half of the game and the other for the other half, this is not fair. Byram hasn't really risen to that level yet. The potential's absolutely there. That's why he's on the board. Tampa Bay is the one I kind of had to go to question marks on. Asimont's 27. I wanted to put Asimont up there, but I was like, well, he's 27, so that's way older than anybody else I'm putting on the board. At least I'm pretty sure. But I will say honorable mention to Asimont because he's found a home in Tampa Bay. He's far more prominent there than he ever was as a Winnipeg Jet, or during that brief. Did he actually play for San Jose? Anyways, Asimont I think's found a really good home in Tampa Bay, and there's some potential there. For the LA Kings, player that's really impressed me so far this year, and I think there's more offense there, Laferriere. Laferriere, 32 games played so far, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points. And again, if you haven't seen Laferriere play, I recommend it. The work ethic is really strong. Reminds me of like Arvidsson before he broke through, this kind of thing. Like the work ethic's really strong. You can see all the tools are there. At some point in time, he could put that together, become a 20-25 goal scorer. I could see it. But again, not every player that shows that potential necessarily reaches that. That's where I think for GMs it has to be frustrating that there isn't really that crystal ball to see what a guy can do. But Laferriere, the good thing for him is when he's not scoring, still a very useful player, and I think he's definitely played himself onto this roster for the rest of the season. For Philadelphia, a team that's been a surprise. That's the reason I'm wearing Flyers, because I think of the surprises in the NHL, they might be the largest of the surprises, at least in the positive. And Vancouver, honorable mention there too. Sure, yep. All right, so we're going with Morgan Frost for Philadelphia. He's been in the doghouse on and off with John Tortorella, but he has 5 goals, 6 assists for 11 points in 26 games. So my thought process is this. He could have a good, strong second half of the season with Philly. He's been good in the games he's played lately. I think he's played his way back into the everyday roster. Hopefully Tortorella agrees. But in the event that Philadelphia were to make him available via trade, I think he's shown enough that his value will go up. And maybe a team like Seattle would come in and say, you know what, he's got the talent. We could put him in the lineup and try to turn his game around. Maybe a team like San Jose says, look, we can give him all the ice time in the world. So if Frost ends up in the right situation, I think he could have a really good second half. Not Winnipeg. That's a Buffalo logo. Winnipeg isn't until here, and I didn't even use the regular Jets logo. I apologize. It's been a long day. All right, Owen Power. So Power had a great first year, and I remember people being upset that he didn't get more consideration for the Calder Trophy. This year, it's kind of been a bit of a setback. So there's definitely the sophomore jinx, right? 38 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 16 points. The production's been okay, but again, we haven't seen Power take that next step as expected. But it can take time. It can take time. I still think Power is going to be one of the best defensemen in the NHL when he reaches his peak, and that should only help Buffalo. I'm baffled at how Buffalo has as rough of a record as they do. That might warrant its own video, right? Talking about the Sabres a little bit, maybe, yeah. All right, Calgary. Getting over to Calgary, I went with a player who struggled out of the gate, Coronado, who's played, of course, down with the Wranglers and everything. Just the 11 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. But again, for Calgary, they've shown that they're willing to bring up Pospisil. They're also willing to bring up and give Zary all the ice time in the world. Coronado, I think there's a spot for him once he really gets this game going. And if he does and he gets called up, then we'll see how things go for him in Calgary. But Coronado's gone from, top-notch prospect and a lot of buzz about him to not really much being said about him around the NHL, and I don't think things change that quickly, so we'll see how things go for Coronado. For Nashville, and again, this is from watching their games. Evangelista's been very good lately. I don't think the stats show how well he's been playing. 36 games. He just has 5 goals, so I'm putting him on the board because he has 17 points. Good production, the 5 goals. A little bit low, and I think that he is capable of scoring at a higher rate. So the points per game, fine, but I think the goals per game, I definitely think he's capable of producing at a little bit higher rate than that. So I almost put Tomasino. I'm putting Evangelista anyways. Similar stats, similar situation, but yeah, I'm going with Evangelista for this video. All right, Rangers. So for Rangers, I'm going with a player who's been injured but should be back soon. And I have talked about this player for years. I don't think it's risen to the point of a meme, but it probably should. Kakko, 20 games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. We have watched this year as Lafreniere's really kind of started to grow into the role that was expected of him. Sure, he's not scoring the points of what we would have hoped for when he was drafted first overall, but the production's there. He's playing very well. He has fit into the top 6. Now, with Kakko coming back, you're not putting the kid line back together. Lafreniere's really, really done quite well. So Kakko's going to have to, once he gets back in the lineup, figure out how to get that production going. I do think that with this season, if Kakko's numbers don't get better, he might be a good candidate for the Rangers to trade in the offseason. Because he's still young enough that I think there's teams that would be willing to take a chance with him. For New Jersey, not a lot with New Jersey that I could choose. Obviously, I'm not going to pick Luke Hughes. Luke Hughes is doing quite well. But I figured, you know what? Nemitz. We'll see how much Nemitz plays once they have a healthy blue line. But in 14 games, he has a goal, 4 assists, 5 points. The defensive side of it, he's had some rough points here and there. I do feel bad for the Devils with the number of young defensemen they have. Obviously, you're going to have your struggles. But Nemitz is quite good. And the expectation is he's going to be a top defenseman for the Devils. And so I feel like he could have a really strong second half. As long as he plays, he could have a very strong second half. And that's where it gets kind of tricky with some of these ones. For Detroit, Moritz Seider. Going back to last summer when I was talking about the best defenseman in the league, there were some who felt that I had Seider far too low in consideration for best defenseman in the league. He's had an up and down season. 5 goals, 17 assists, 22 points in 37 games. Detroit, I think, could benefit from another really good veteran. Like when Detroit was winning Stanley Cups, they would bring in a Paul Coffey. They would bring in a Chris Chelios. Bring in a guy who's a veteran and could play. And it did seem to really help the rest of the team as well. I think that's the kind of thing Detroit needs now. They need maybe an older defenseman who could come in and really mentor some of these players, especially Seider, take some of the pressure off. I don't know how that works. I don't know who they bring in. I'm not saying like Gostisbehere hasn't been good. He has, but it's not quite the same as mentioning him with Chelios, Coffey, others that went in and played for them. Certainly like Fetisov coming in and playing. Like just there are some really good defensemen for the Detroit Red Wings in their history that we could talk about here when we talk about veterans. Because Fetisov, he was in New Jersey. He was in Detroit. Anyway. So, Oilers. Coming back from injury and quite quickly too. Holloway's basically almost cleared. So when I was looking for a player for Edmonton, I was like, well, what's Holloway's status? Yeah, he's really, really close. 14 games, just the 1 goal for Holloway. So while he's been injured, we've seen as guys like Fogle, McLeod, Ryan, certainly to some extent, these guys have been pitching in and getting points. Gagne, who's also been dealing with, in and out of the lineup kind of stuff too. Definitely none of them are young players necessarily, but Holloway, I will be curious to see once he gets back into the lineup, or does he get back into the lineup, right? Is he going to have to wait for an injury to really and truly get into the lineup? Because the Oilers are doing quite well right now, and you don't mess with that when you're doing well. So Holloway, I think, still has the skill. I think the effort's there. He just hasn't had any puck luck, and that can happen. So just the 1 goal in 14 games. We'll see how the second half of the season goes for him. Chicago, I think if you're going to talk about production that has not been where fans want it to be, I think you have to look at Reichel. 35 games, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. Reichel was supposed to be there with Bedard, and there was a lot of discussion before the season started about how exciting it might be if they got to play together a bit here and there. But while Bedard is running around a point per game, Reichel has had his struggles. Just the 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points in 35 games so far. So I don't think I'm telling any tales to say Reichel hasn't exactly lived up to the expectations before the season started, but he's far too young for people to give up on. It's that interesting thing in sports. People are always like, I love these prospects. Our prospects are going to be great. And then they play like 10 games in the NHL, and you'll already see fans going, oh, this guy's a bum. He's never going to make it. He's young. He's still the same guy he was a month ago when you were praising him. Anyways, we'll see if Reichel can turn it around in the second half. For Ottawa, so Ottawa's, of course, coming off of a really, really rough month of December. Ridley Gregg, I think Ottawa fans are still fans of his. 22 games, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. But again, I don't think I'd be upsetting anybody in saying Gregg's performance hasn't necessarily been as even. Yes, he's had an injury as well that he's had to come back from. But he could have a really good, strong second half to the season. And if Ottawa's going to salvage this season and push towards the playoffs, it's going to need to be guys like Gregg who step up. Because we've still seen good production from, even with Stützle not producing the way that they might want, his production's still been good. Production from Giroux's been good as well. Batherson's been quite good. It's going to be on the other guys. Because obviously defensively and goaltending-wise, there's been some issues. So they would need extra goals in order to overcome that. So, we'll see how it goes with Ottawa. All right, moving on to Boston. Coming back from World Juniors, where Canada didn't win the gold. What's interesting is I've already seen people going, haha, the hockey guy, Canada's out. I didn't watch any of the World Juniors, so I don't really have an emotional attachment. But Poitras coming back, we'll see how he does coming out. There are players who do quite well coming back from World Juniors. So 27 games for Poitras, 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points. I think Matthew Poitras' production was good at the start of the year. I think he was having more trouble as we got up to the Christmas break, and obviously goes over and plays in the World Juniors. I think there's still a lot of potential there. I'll be interested to see what role they put him in. Like, for instance, tonight the Bruins aren't playing Beecher. They've been trying to load manage with both Poitras and Beecher when they've been there, so it will be interesting to see. But Poitras has all the potential in the world. Washington, there were a few different options, but I went with Lapierre. Hendrix Lapierre, when he's been in the lineup, I think has been good. This is the trick, right? Some of these guys don't get a lot of ice time because of the fact that there's a lot of depth and maybe there aren't enough injuries, but Lapierre in 17 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. And I think, again, solid in the games he played, and there's more upside there. He was a first-round draft pick, so clearly Washington saw that when they drafted him, and I think they've done their due diligence. They've taken their time with him. Not every prospect has to be rushed into the NHL. San Jose, who haven't been rushing players either, but Eklund. Early in the season, his production wasn't great, but nobody in San Jose had great production. 36 games, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points. Absolutely, Eklund's capable of numbers that are vastly superior to that, and maybe we see that in the second half of the season. San Jose only has 9 wins thus far this year. I do feel bad for some of the young guys when they go through this. It's trial by fire, but you can come out the other side of this, and you're a better player having gone through it. Some players are. Sakic comes to mind as one that went through a lot of losing early in his career. Clearly, it didn't agree with him because he didn't lose a lot after that. But I'm not saying Eklund is in the same region as Sakic or anything. I'm just saying I understand that it can be tough to go through all those losses early in a career, but players do come through that and end up being better on the other side. For Winnipeg, a player that's coming back for them, young player as well, and the other part of the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, or PL Dubois trade. Kupari, 15 games this year, just the 1 assist. Kupari's capable of better. Now, I really do wonder with Kupari how much top 9 upside there is still there. It was debatable when he came over from LA. Is he just a 4th liner? That's where he's going to be, or is there still that top 9? Could he end up being a top 6 at some point? I don't think we know. But I will say the 0 goals, that'll change before the year's over. I'll go out on a limb and say he gets at least a goal before the season's over. And I think on a Winnipeg team that's got a really good mix of young players and veterans, Kupari's another. I would have put Perfetti on the board, but his production's just fine. There's no reason to think Perfetti needs to produce more right now. Montreal, for the Habs, this one kind of stands out. I would expect most people will look at this name on the board and go, yep. But I wanted to talk about this too. So Slavkovsky, 36 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. Slavkovsky has been much better the last few weeks. They've started giving him ice time, and he's rewarded them with much better play. It has not translated into the kind of points that it will. It reminds me of what Byfield went through last year with the LA Kings. He got bumped up to the first line, still not producing a lot, but playing much better. And so it didn't show on the score sheet. People are still saying Byfield's a bust. He's not going to make it. This is terrible. They should trade him. Don't give him money. And this year, Byfield's numbers have been a lot better. Slavkovsky, to me, is trending in that same direction. Playing better all-around play, just not showing on the score sheet yet. But yeah, Montreal's not going to be giving up on him unless Carolina signs him to some kind of offer sheet. But I don't think that's coming either. Carolina, this wasn't easy because they don't have a lot of young players, like I talked about when I did the rookie videos. They don't really have a rookie on their team. So I'm going with Svechnikov. Now, before people are like, wait a minute, Svechnikov's been fine lately. Yep. That's why he's on the board, because he has 6 goals in 22 games, but over half of those are over the last week. 21 points in 22 games is good, but that's 6 goals. Svechnikov's a goal scorer. So I'm not sure why Svechnikov's goal scoring has been lacking. I think he's worthy of talking about. Caulfield, Montreal, Ovechkin in Washington. There are some goal scorers worthy of discussion that aren't producing like goal scorers. Just like some guys that we don't think of as goal scorers are getting some really good goal totals as well. And yes, that does warrant a video, but for this one, Svechnikov's on the board. I think in the second half of the season, I could see 20 goals in the second half of the season. I could see that for Svechnikov. I still think there's a 50-goal scorer in there. It's the same thing we've said about Laine for years. Laine just hasn't gotten to the 50 goals. It's not easy to get to 50 goals, is it? Minnesota. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Minnesota, this is going to be one that is an eyebrow raiser too, but I will explain this. And I explain all of these so people will fast forward to the end and say, I don't know what he's talking about. This guy's fine. Rossi, 35 games, 11 goals, 11 assists, 22 points. Marco Rossi's been all around it. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised Rossi isn't closer to a point per game, and I would be very surprised if he's not producing at around a point per game in the second half of the season. He's been fantastic. So it took a long time for Rossi to get here, comparatively speaking with what people had hoped, but he has been well worth the wait. I think Rossi's been quite good. It took him a while to get that first goal. Once he got that, he's now got 11. I would not be surprised to see Rossi end up with about 65 points by the end of the year. I honestly think he's got a ton of potential. I could see next summer when I'm ranking forwards and defensemen all over again that Rossi could end up being on a list where I talk glowingly about him, because I like the Wild. I think the Wild have a good team there. I think there's some good young players, and if Guerin can continue to navigate the cap, this could be quite the era for the Minnesota Wild, where they could be a team that does really well and maybe goes on a bit of a run in the playoffs while still having that handicap with the cap that's on their mind and on their books. Columbus. So for Columbus, I'm going with Kent Johnson. Kent Johnson's been much better since being called up from the minors. Now that I've said it, he's going to get sent back down, isn't he? And if he does, I apologize. I've jinxed him. But in 22 games, he has 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points. He had a very good rookie year. This year, some regression, some tough games for him. But I think Kent Johnson has all the talent, and I would be very surprised if he doesn't start getting more goals and points in the second half of the season. Interestingly enough, once I learn how to talk and all that, Columbus's production hasn't really been a problem. It's been on the defensive and the goaltending side where the stats haven't necessarily been where you want them to be. But now with Kent Johnson, if he can start producing more, it's about outscoring some of the other issues. So maybe Columbus really opens things up and it benefits Johnson. Seattle was pretty easy. Last year's Rookie of the Year was Matty Beniers. He is not playing offensively or defensively like he did last year. He has 38 games, 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points. And it's remarkable because when Beniers came up and started playing for Seattle, I thought this kid was fantastic. He was playing really well. Now, whether the league has adjusted to how he was playing and shut down some of the really strong plays that he was making, both offensively and defensively, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's been a rough go for him so far. But yeah, those 5 goals are way too low, and the 18 points are way too low. Matty Beniers, once he reaches his peak, I would think he's got to be at least a point per game player. It has not shown so far this year. He's got to hit at some point soon. Dallas, Wyatt Johnston. Wyatt Johnston has had some of the unluckiest of unluckies this year. Now, what's weird is he has 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points in 35 games. Those are good numbers. But if you watch Dallas games, Johnston should have way more than that. Johnston should have more goals. He should have more points. So I think the puck's going to start going into the net, and I think that he's going to dwarf these numbers in the second half of the season. I just do. I think he should be in the 55, 60 point range by the end of the season. Really exciting time to be a Dallas fan right now. It's kind of odd that the teams I root for, Boston, Dallas, Vancouver, they're all on significant, really, really remarkably similar paths, and they've gone there significantly different ways. And it's fun for me to watch as a fan. But Johnston's just great. Arizona, this one might be a little bit obvious for Arizona fans too. I'm going with Logan Cooley. In 35 games this season, and remember, he is a rookie. 3 goals, 15 assists, 18 points. There's no shame in a rookie struggling to score goals. We did see in the preseason, Cooley, really, really excellent highlight reel goal. He hasn't really shown that in the regular season because it's tougher to make those moves in the regular season. You're far more likely to get a defenseman that goes, yeah, you're not getting past me with that. And so he just gets blocked out, and we don't really talk about it. I might write on the board, Cooley's net drive is blocked out. Done. But Cooley still has all the skill, all the talent, the speed, everything is there, all the ingredients. Just a matter of getting it all together, and I think Cooley's absolutely going to do that. Florida. So I think at this point this has to be at meme level because I talk about Anton Lundell a lot, and I still think Lundell's going to be a 20-plus goal scorer in the NHL. 32 games, 2 goals, 10 assists, 12 points. That 2 goals is just too low. Lundell is a very good, hardworking player. The good news, if you're a Florida fan, of course, and you'd know this, is Lundell's defensive game is strong. So when he's not scoring goals, it's okay. He's not hurting you. And there are definitely players on the board here who are strong defensively, and so that ensures they stay in the lineup. It also means they'll be able to play through rough patches like that with 2 goals in 32 games and come out the other side and start producing again. So I look forward to seeing when Lundell gets that started. Hopefully it's not against Boston, but why wouldn't it be against Boston? Because, sure, Florida got it going against Boston in the playoffs. So why not have one of the young players get it going the next time they play Boston? The New York Islanders, the Islanders are tough. I kind of have to go back to the player I've talked about many times over. So if you're an Islanders fan and you sat through this entire video and you're like, all right, he's going to talk about... Don't talk about Wallstrom. Don't talk about Wallstrom. Don't talk about Wallstrom. Okay. Don't think about pink elephants. It's the same thing. Because now you're all thinking about pink elephants, and I'm going to talk about Eric Wallstrom. Eric Wallstrom. Oliver Wallstrom. 19 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. Is there even an Eric on the board? Wallstrom with the 2 goals, that's just too low. He has all the skill. And again, you know, I've talked about this for years. I don't know that Wallstrom necessarily puts up the numbers in New York or if he's going to get traded and put up those numbers somewhere else. And I could mention the same places I mentioned earlier in the video about where you could possibly go, which would be a team like San Jose where you're going to get ice time, maybe a team like Anaheim you're going to get ice time, or maybe a team like Seattle that has these reclamation projects. You know what? Wahlstrom would fit in really well with the Coyotes. Wahlstrom, if he was with Arizona, the goal scoring would suddenly be there. But again, hopefully he gets it together with the New York Islanders. And I say that with Arizona because they seem to get the production out of guys. They know who to pick up. The Coyotes are doing a very good job with developing players. I'm not saying the Islanders are not, but it does feel like for Wahlstrom, for him to get the production, he may need a change of scenery. For the Ducks, there's only one guy I can go with for the Ducks, and he's been injured for more than half of the season that's been played. But when he's been in the lineup, he just doesn't look the same, and that's Trevor Zegras. So since coming back from injury, he's looked a little bit better than he did before he got injured. He's played 16 games altogether, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points. He did get the Michigan goal. He did get a nice assist the other night as well. So there are reasons to think he's coming through this. But yeah, 5 points in 16 games is way too low for Zegras. Maybe Zegras never becomes that megastar we thought he would. Maybe he is going to be a guy who scores fancy goals here and there. But in general, his production's never quite what we think it should be. But yeah, Zegras has all the talent. There's way too much talent for him to be sitting with 2 goals and 5 points. Again, understanding he's coming out of an injury and all that, but he's too talented for this. For Toronto, I'm going with Liljegren. And I did decide not to use goalies in this because goalies, it's a whole other thing, right? But Liljegren, 17 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. So I just wanted to do the production thing. With goalies, you're not talking about production, you're talking about something else. But then I reserve the right to talk about goalies tomorrow. Liljegren, 17 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, not 16. 1 plus 5 is not 16. I really didn't get much sleep last night. I'm going to apologize for all of the other misspeaking I've done. But Liljegren, I think there's a lot there. I think they made a mistake giving up on Sandin. I'm just going to say I think they made a mistake of giving up on Sandin. I think that while Sandin hasn't lit things up in Washington, and I thought about using him for Washington, but I didn't because I was using Liljegren. I felt like, it's going to feel like I'm kind of picking on Toronto and pointing out their young defensemen. But like Dursey, they traded Dursey. There's other young players that Toronto's traded. I think you've got to trust these young players. You've got to give them that chance. Understanding the pressure they're under and everything, but you've got to give guys that chance. How great would Trevor Moore look in a Toronto jersey right now? But he gets traded out. Liljegren, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. I think he's capable of a lot more. I hope he gets there in the second half. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh wasn't easy either. This is where I'm getting into a player who's actually older, 24 years of age and all that. But for Puustinen, 10 games, 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points. So he's producing. He hasn't played a ton of games. He's getting ice time. He is prominent in these Pittsburgh games. I'd be kind of surprised if Puustinen doesn't end up producing really well the rest of the way and generating a lot of buzz going forward. One thing with a player who's 24, what you see is likely what you get. You're probably not going to see like explosive growth in the second season of their career, but you can get really good production that is sustainable. So, yeah, I'm going with Puustinen. For St. Louis, this was relatively easy too, because Jordan Kyrou's been better lately. I know the fans were really mad at him. I get it. I think the fans were mad at him due to a lack of production. So at the time that he says, well, Burby's not my coach anymore, which is true. I think fans got more upset because it was Kyrou, and they didn't feel like he was giving 110% on the ice. Understanding you can only give 100% because it's out of 100, but 110%, right? But Kyrou's 9 goals in 36 games, that's got to go up in the second half of the season. Just the 26 points, and he has been producing better lately. So I think Kyrou's numbers are going to go up. I don't think he's going to end up justifying the contract for this season, but he can justify the contract the rest of the way. Which brings us to Vancouver. I'm going to end here. Vancouver was not easy either to find somebody underproducing and young. In fact, I did go with the 27-year-old, so I apologize to Tampa fans. You can put AC Mont up there if you want, but I'm going to go with, for Vancouver, because you kind of have to. But again, he's older, and that's Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko, 31 games, 8 goals, 11 assists, 19 points. And much like some of the others on the board, his production's been better lately. So there's good reason to think that Kuzmenko's coming out of this. But statements from the GM, statements from Jim Rutherford have led a lot of people to believe that his time in Vancouver not likely to be that much longer. Rick Tocchet wants him to back check. He's not really a back checker, and I understand that. I get it, but I also understand why a coach might be wanting more from that player than what they're getting. So I think Kuzmenko, whether it's in Vancouver or somewhere else, I think the production is going to pick up. He should be at least a 25 goal scorer this season, but we'll see. So the question I have to all you fine people on the internet is, which one of these players do you think has a really strong second half of the season, and which one do you think, nope, he's not going to turn it around, it's not going to happen? And why do we just say not Capo Caco? Because that's going to be the obvious answer, I would think, and maybe Wahlstrom. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. On days like today, it is much appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.